Again, it is good to have you here today, and we welcome our guests. We are glad that you can be with us. You are going to think that all we are doing today is completely reading through the Bible, which might be close, but we don't have a lot of time to dawdle this morning, so let's get into our text. Remember, the brothers were sent back from Egypt by Joseph with instructions to bring his father and the family back to Egypt and settle there and allow Joseph to provide for them. Now, you can imagine Jacob's skepticism as they see the brothers coming with wagon after wagon of food and provisions. For all he knew, those guys had stopped on the way and knocked off a 7-Eleven, knowing their character. But they said, no, you're not going to believe this, but your son, Joseph, really is alive. And so we see in the text, they told him Joseph is still alive, and in fact, he is the ruler of all Egypt. And Jacob was stunned and did not believe them. But when they told him everything Joseph had said to them, and when he saw the carts that Joseph had sent to carry him back, the spirit of their father Jacob revived, and Israel said, notice the change in the name there, Jacob to Israel, one of those little slight things that you pick up. Israel said, I'm convinced my son Joseph is still alive. We will go down and see him before I die, and his daughters and granddaughters, all the offspring. And so Israel set out with all that was his, and when he reached Beersheba, he offered sacrifices to the God of his father Isaac. Now, this is an important stop on the way because Abraham had a spiritual experience at Beersheba. Isaac had a spiritual experience at Beersheba. They had built altars and worshiped God, and Jacob is going back to the area where he was raised, back to the family grounds, and back to a place where God had met with his family. And so he figured it was very important for him to stop there and remember the God of his father Isaac. And he had a dream. And it says, God spoke to Israel in a vision at night and said, Jacob, Jacob. Here I am, he replied. I'm God. I'm El, the generic name for God. By the way, we don't have a lot of time left in the story of Joseph, and we've got the holidays coming up and some special things. And so what I would like to do, I think, is do a short series on the names of God in the Bible. And so you have that to look forward to in a couple of weeks. But he said, I'm God. He said, I'm the God of your father. He said, do not be afraid to go down to Egypt, for I will make you into a great nation there. Now we're going to see in a minute, and that's what the bulk of our time today is going to be, is why Jacob should be afraid of going down to Egypt. But God says, go down to Egypt. Don't be afraid to do that. He said, I will go down to Egypt with you, and I will surely bring you back again. And Joseph's own hand will close your eyes. That boy that you think has been gone to you, lost to you for these 25 years, he's going to be with you when you die, holding your hand, and he'll close your eyes. Not only are you going to get to hold Joseph again, but he is going to be with you many times during your remaining years. And then Jacob left Beersheba, and Israel's son took their father Jacob and their children and their wives in the carts that Pharaoh had sent to transport him. And they took with them their livestock and the possessions they had acquired in Canaan. And Jacob and all his offspring went to Egypt. And he took with him to Egypt his sons and his grandsons, all of his offspring. Now, we're going to spend some background time in the story and go back all the way back to Grandpa Abraham and God's call of him. God determined to make a people out of Abraham. And so he called Abraham and Sarah, and they were living in probably what we would know as part of Iraq or Iran today, near the stands, Turkmenistan and Tajikistan and so on. And he said, leave this place and go to a place I'll tell you. And so Abraham he was Abram then, took his father and his nephew and his wife Sarah with him, and they went down to Haran. Let's look at the text. The Lord God said to Abram, leave your country, your people, and your father's household, and go to the land that I will show you. Now, what's important about this is your clan, your family, was really your protection. They didn't have police forces and armies and so on to enforce the peace. And so your protection came from your clan. And God said, leave them behind. I'm going to take you and I'm going to move you to a land that I'm going to show you. And I'm going to make you into a great nation, and I'll bless you, and I will make your name great, and you will be a blessing. I will bless those who bless you, and whoever curses you I will curse, and all the people of the earth will be blessed through you. And Abram left as the Lord had told him, and Lot went with him. Abram was 75 years old when he started out from Haran. Now, he is now leaving Haran and going down to the promised land, and he took his wife Sarai, his nephew Lot, all their possessions they had accumulated, and the people they had acquired in Haran, and they set out for the land of Canaan, and they arrived there. And so all the people they acquired in Canaan would be their servants, their slaves. And so even back in those days, there was servitude. Don't let anyone tell you that that's an invention of white Europeans in the last 300 years or so. It has been since the beginning of time that people would take servants and use them for their tasks. And so Abram traveled through the land as far as the great tree of Morah at Shechem. And at that time, the Canaanites were in the land. Now, remember, the Canaanites were a idolatrous, very wicked people. Some friends of mine who were into the Semitic languages were forced to read some of the Canaanite texts in the original languages and said it was like pornography. And so it was very evil. They did child sacrifice and human sacrifice. And so this was an immoral people that Abram was moving among. And he said, listen, the people in Ur might have been bad, but were they this bad? Why are you moving me among this group of people? Well, what we're going to do is just take a quick gander at some of these areas that were significant in the travel of Abraham. Now, here's Damascus, and really, or Haran, where they're coming from, is way up in here, kind of almost straight across from Turkey. This is Syria in here, and so you see Abram's route down and we'll continue on in our text. And really, we'll deal with that in a minute. And he said, from there, said he went as far as the tree of Morah, and so that was obviously a famous landmark in that area. And he built an altar there at Shechem. And the Lord appeared to Abram and said, your offspring I will give this land. And from there he went to Bethel, to the on down. And so it says he goes from Shechem in here, and he goes to Bethel, which is just a little west of there. And he keeps traveling on from Bethel, and he goes down to Beersheba, and eventually we're going to see him go down into Egypt. And then Abram set out and continued toward the Negev. And the Negev is the desert region down in this area. And so we're told that he went from there, he continued to the Negev, and there was famine in the land. And Abram went down to Egypt to live there for a while because the famine was severe. So, okay, now we're finding a famine in Canaan. Another time we're looking at Joseph and we see there's famine, but now it says that there was a famine, and so he went down to Egypt. Now the problem with that is Egypt is normally a symbol for evil in the Bible. In biblical symbology, going to Egypt stands for going into the world and having a wrong alliance with it. And so God's people are to stay away from Egypt. Now, there are two situations that contradict that, where God specifically tells people to go to Egypt. First of all, he tells Jacob to go ahead and take his family, but this is why Jacob is afraid to go down to Egypt, because he knows the family stories that going down to Egypt doesn't end up good. God did not allow that, and so Jacob was hesitant to hear Joseph's invitation to settle in Egypt. Later on, it's expressed in Isaiah, way late in the history of the Old Testament. The same thing is expressed in Isaiah 33, where Isaiah says through God, woe to those who go down to Egypt for help, who rely on horses, who trust in multitudes of their chariot and in the strength of their horsemen. Do not look to the Holy One of Israel or seek help from the Lord. And so really, to go down to Egypt means to rely on human resources rather than God's resources. Where you say, okay, God, I'll do it myself. I'll call you when I need you. I think I have this handled. And so, it's something that we must avoid as believers. When we find ourselves in Egypt, when we find ourselves relying on our own wits, our own flesh, our own devices, we need to realize that and leave Egypt immediately and not go back. So, this is the lesson in the next segment of Abram's life. Abraham heard the call of God. He left both Ur and Haran, and went into Canaan. And now he gets there, and there's a famine there. What does this God know? He's sending me from this place where I'm really all right, and now there is a famine in this land. And so he decides that the smart thing to do is to go down to Egypt. In other words, I've got a plan. And so I'll plan my plan. I'll do what I think is best. Now remember, going down to Egypt means, in the Bible, it's a picture for relying on your own resources. There was a great Scottish preacher and Bible expositor named Robert Candlish, who died in, I think, 1879 or so. In a commentary on these verses, gave some reasons why this sounded legitimate. First of all, these were the problems that Abram was facing. His wife was barren. He was supposed to be a great nation, but his wife was barren. His destination wasn't known. God said, go to a place that I tell you. And so he didn't have a place where he could settle. He was forced to wander around, and God said, when you get there, I'll let you know. God hadn't let him know yet, and so he figured maybe Egypt was the proper place to go. He was leaving his people. His father died on the way. These are all complications that are happening in this trip that God has sent Abram on from Haran to into the land of Canaan. And like I said, he found no home. He was a wanderer. And so didn't it make sense to keep on going because God didn't say stop? And like I said, there was also a famine. And Candlish makes this comment, and as if all this were not enough, even daily bread begins to fail him. What now is he to do? He's hitherto been steadfast. He's builded an altar wherever he's dwelt. He's called on the name of the Lord. He has at all hazards avowed his faith and sought to glorify God. But it seems as if from very necessity he must at last abandon this fruitless undertaking. Obviously, trusting in God isn't getting it done, and so you know that great verse of the Bible from Hesitations 2:4 that says, God helps them who help themselves. And so, I hope you know Hesitations is not a book of the Bible. So, it's easy to identify with Abram at this point, isn't it? We look at the situation and say, well, it seems reasonable to me to keep on going down to Egypt. And we think that because that's how we reason out of our flesh and our natural abilities. We think, obeying God is good and right as long as everything goes well. But if trouble comes, famine, peril, or sword, piety goes out the window, and we trust not in God, but in our own cleverness and our own devices. And if those don't work, we turn to the world and ask the world to provide for us. And boy, the world will reward us if we are a part of the world, if we're part of them and go its way. But the point that was being made is this isn't the way that it should be for us as believers. That isn't the course that a believer should take. What should Abram have done? Well, he should have trusted God. Apparently, he didn't ask if he should go to Egypt. He just said, well, next stop, Egypt, and kept on traveling. God hadn't brought him into Canaan to starve, just as he didn't bring the Hebrew children in the wilderness to starve when they were on their exodus out of Egypt into the promised land. It seems like when Abram left Bethel, the house of God, Baeth is house, El, God, his place of worship, he didn't get back to Bethel until he was expelled from Egypt. House of God was Abram's last recorded residence. And it was there that Abram built an altar to the Lord. And he called on the name of the Lord. And, maybe when he leaves Bethel, he leaves his place of worship. Let's see what happens in Egypt. As he was about to enter Egypt, he said to his wife Sarai, I know what beautiful woman you are. When the Egyptians see this, they will say this is his wife. They will kill me, but leave you to live. Say you're my sister. And it's kind of a half-truth because she was a near relative of his. So that I will be treated well for your sake, and my life will be spared because of you. I'll sell you to the Egyptians, but it'll spare my life. When Abram came to Egypt, the Egyptians saw that she was a very beautiful woman. Now remember, she's 75, 76 years old, and she still has a great beauty about her that is attractive to these men. And when Pharaoh's officials saw her, they praised her to Pharaoh, and she was taken into his palace. And he treated Abram well for her sake. And Abram acquired sheep and cattle and male and female donkeys, men servants and maid servants, and camels. Why didn't I think of this 45 years ago? Trade you for some silver and gold and some camels and donkeys. But the Lord inflicted serious diseases on Pharaoh and his household because of Abram's wife, Sarai. Why do you say she is your sister? So I took her to be my wife. Now then, here is your wife. Take her and go. Then Pharaoh gave orders about Abraham to his men that they sent him on his way with his wife and everything that he had. Abram's response, well, he's actually kicked out, but his response is to obey, leave Egypt, and he returns to Bethel, where he had built an altar. He is returning to where he made a vow to God. And so in the next chapter it says, Abram went up from Egypt to Negev with his wife, everything he had, and Lot went with him. And Abram had become very wealthy in livestock and in silver and gold. And from the Negev he went from that place to place until he came to Bethel, for the place between Bethel and Ai, where his tent had been earlier, and where he had first built an altar. And there Abram called on the name of the Lord. He's coming back to first principles. And again, we see the trip. He leaves Egypt, down in Egypt, and travels back up and into Bethel. And eventually the family is going to settle around Hebron. And that is where the field of Machpelah is, where Abraham and Sarah and Isaac and Rebekah are buried. And so that's the family grave plot. There we go. And so he is coming back to where he meets with God, and here's what God says. Now, Lot, who was moving around with Abram, had also had flocks and herds and tents, but the land could not support both of them. And they stayed together, for his possessions were so great that they were not able to stay together. And while they stayed together, the possessions were so great that they couldn't stay together. And quarreling arose between Abram's herdsmen and the herdsmen of Lot. The Canaanites and the Perizzites were also living in the land at that time, and they were taking up space. And so Abram said to Lot, let's separate. Let's not have any quarreling between you and me or between your herdsmen and mine, for we are brothers. Is not the whole land before you? Let's part company. If you go to the left, I'll go to the right. If you go to the right, I'll go to the left. And Lot looked up, and he saw the whole plain of Jordan was well watered, like the Garden of Eden, the garden of the Lord, towards Zoar. And that's at the bottom of the Dead Sea and right around Sodom and Gomorrah. And this was beautiful before God destroyed Sodom and Gomorrah. And so Lot chose for himself the whole plain on the Jordan and set out toward the east, and the two men parted company. Abram lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot among the cities of the plain, and pitched his tents near Sodom. And now the men of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. But the Lord said to Abram, after Lot had parted from him, lift up your eyes. Now here's another promise that God gives him. He says, okay, you've been obedient. Now lift up your eyes, look north, look south. Look east, look west. Everywhere you're looking, that's going to belong to you. All the land that you see, I'm going to give you and your offspring forever. And again, Jacob is faced in the text we're looking at today, primarily. Do I leave the land that God has delivered to Abram and his offspring forever? Will I be like Abram going down to Egypt? Will I be like my father who wanted to leave the land but God prevented him? And I'm going to make your offspring like the dust of the earth so that anyone could count them. Then your offspring could be counted. Now, go. Walk through the length and breadth of the land. Just take a walk. And everywhere you put your foot, you can say, mine. God gave it to me. This is God's blessing. And so, Abram left Bethel to live near the great trees of Mamre at Hebron, where he built an altar to the Lord. And so he moves down to Hebron, where I said the cave of Machpelah is. And at Hebron, he worshiped God. Now, Jacob also looks back to his dad and the stories he's heard from his dad. Here's what Isaac experienced. Now there was a famine in the land besides the earlier famine of Abraham's time. And Isaac went to Abimelech, the king of the Philistines at Gerar. And the Lord appeared to Isaac and said, do not go down to Egypt. Live in the land where I tell you to live. In other words, don't rely on your fleshly wisdom, what you think is wise, what you think you should do. Stay here and obey and live in the land. Stay in this land for a while and I will be with you. Go down to Egypt, you're going to find trouble. Stay here, I'll be with you. I'll bless you. For you and your descendants I will give all these lands and will confirm the oath I swore to your father Abraham. And I will make your descendants as numerous as the stars in the sky, and will give them all these lands. And through your offspring, all the nations of the earth will be blessed. because Abraham obeyed me and kept my requirements, my commands, my decrees, and my laws. And so Isaac stayed in Gerar. I heard the story. I heard what happened. Not going to do that again. Lord told me stay put. I'm going to stay put. Now, let me just do a quick little summary. Now, here shows Haran all the way up here, and we see how far it is from Damascus. And he comes down into the area, this is Isaac's journey, with his dad into Hebron. And you notice that Isaac really doesn't move a lot from that area. He kind of stays put in that area where God has given him. And again, it's in this area between Beersheba and Gerar. Is where he lives. And right down in here is the well of Bir-Lahai-Roi, which was the well that Hagar saw when she ran away from Sarah, her mistress. And so Isaac lived in that area as well. And so we see stayed in Gerar, but same pattern. When the men of that place asked him about his wife, he said, she's my sister, because he was afraid to say she is my wife. She is really his cousin. He thought the men of this place might kill me on account of Rebekah because she is beautiful. And when Isaac had been there a long time, Abimelech, the king of the Philistines, looked down from a window and saw Isaac caressing his wife, Rebekah. And Abimelech summoned Isaac and said, she's really your wife. Why did you say she's your sister? And Isaac answered, because I thought I might lose my life on account of her. And Abimelech said, what is this that you've done with us? One of our men might have slept with your wife, and you would have brought guilt upon us. And so Abimelech gave orders to the people, anyone who molests this man or his wife shall surely be put to death. And so Abimelech put his protection on Isaac. And it says Isaac planted crops in the land, and the same year reaped hundredfold, because the Lord blessed him. There's a famine. He wanted to leave. God left him there. He was there for a point, but then he planted crops. He reaped plentifully because God's blessing was on him, because he obeyed. And the man became rich, and his wealth continued to grow until he became very wealthy. He had so many flocks and herds and servants that the Philistines envied him. And so all the wells that his father's servants had dug in the time of his father Abraham, the Philistines stopped up, filling them up with dirt. And so Abimelech said to Isaac, move away from us, because you've become too powerful for us. Now, it's not because they're so great in number. It's kind of like one of those small towns where one family owns everything. And, they might not have a lot of people in the family, but they've got the money to control everything. And so Abimelech says, get out of here. You've got too much riches. You are too powerful for us. And so Isaac moved away from there and encamped in the valley of Gerar. And we showed that in between Beersheba and Gerar. And he settled there. And what Isaac did was he redug or reopened the wells that had been dug in the time of his father Abraham, which the Philistines had stopped up after Abraham died. And he gave them the same names that his father had given them. And Isaac's servants dug in the valley and discovered a well of fresh water there. But the herdsmen of Gerar quarreled with Isaac's herdsmen and said, the water's ours. And so he named the well Esek, because they disputed with him. Dispute. This well's name is Dispute. And then they dug another well, But they quarreled over that one, so he called it Sitnah, or quarreled. And he moved on from there and dug another well, and no one quarreled, and so he named it Rehoboth, elbow room, saying, now the Lord has given us room, and we will flourish in the land. And from there he went up to Beersheba. That night the Lord appeared to him and said, I'm the God of your father Abraham. Do not be afraid, for I am with you. I will bless you. I will increase the number of your servants for the sake of my servant Abraham. He's giving the same blessing that Abraham got. I am going to make you a great people. You are going to have many descendants. And we're going to see that when Isaac pulls up and leaves to go down into Egypt, he leaves the area of Hebron and in there where he was living and goes down to Egypt. It numbers 70 people in the family. And while they're in Egypt for those 400 years, they grow into a nation of about 3 million people. Okay. And so, because God appeared to him, God made a promise. He built an altar. An altar is for worship and for remembrance. When you see that altar, you say, oh yeah, God made me a promise. And there he pitched his tent, and his servants dug a well. And meanwhile, Abimelech had come to him from Gerar with Ahuzah, his personal advisor, and Phicol, the commander of his forces. And as Isaac asked, why have you come to me since you were hostile to me and sent me away? And they answered, we saw clearly that the Lord was clearly with you, and there ought to be a sworn agreement between us and you. Let us make a treaty with you that you will not cause us harm, that you will do us no harm, that just as we did not molest you, always treated you well and sent you away in peace, now you're blessed by the Lord. And Isaac then made a feast for them, and they ate and drank. And early that morning the men swore an oath to each other. And there Isaac sent them on their way, and they left him in peace. And that day Isaac's servants came and told him that about a well they had dug, and said, we found water. And he called it Sheba for this day, and to this day the town has been Beersheba. Beer, well, Sheba, oath, or 7, because when Abram had made an oath with and named it Beersheba, this is one of the wells they reopened. And Abraham called it Beersheba because he gave them 7 young lambs as a sacrifice or an offering to them. And so it's an oath based on 7. So it's kind of a play of words, the 7 of 7. The oaths of the 7. Okay. So Isaac didn't go down to Egypt because God specifically said, don't go down to Egypt. And so I wanted to give you these narratives as a background to remind you why Isaac would have been skittish when Joseph said, hey, come on down to Egypt. It's a great place. I got room for you, and you can live there. All Isaac knew is that Egypt was trouble. God said, don't rely on your self-effort. Don't go down to the land of flesh. And so that is why God, when he stopped at Beersheba, at this well, where there was an altar, where God had met both Abraham and Isaac, God meets Jacob as well at the well. And he says, go ahead and go. You have my blessing. And he is going to reveal to Jacob a little more that this is going to be his plan to develop the people of Israel into a nation. They're going to be protected in Egypt. They're going to be provided for. And really, even they're going to look at, they've been nomads, right? They're going to observe how civilization works, how government works, and they're going to be able to better govern themselves after experiencing living in this land. And so again, I found it important to share some of this background, why Jacob would be hesitant, because remember, this was the land that was promised to them by God. God said, I'm giving you this land. And so Jacob says, I don't know if I should leave this land. I don't know. Because God's shown that going down to Egypt means relying on your own cunning and resources. And I don't want to rely on Joseph. It's not the right thing to do. And so God comes to Jacob and says, it's okay. And next time we're together, we're going to see how this is all a part of God's plan for the nation of Israel. And we're going to see God's leading hand through the troubles of Joseph and the events with the brothers and so on, and then how the family is resettled there in that fertile region of the Nile Delta, where they will be able to grow great crops and pasture their animals. Let's pray. Father, again, many times we do seek our own wisdom and our own way of doing things, and I ask you, Father, that you will keep us ever mindful to avoid our self-effort, our things that seem right to us that you do not want us to do. Instead, Father, let us look to you for guidance and remind us that this far you've led us and you will continue. You will not leave us. Father, again, thank you in the name of Jesus. Amen.